Okay, just want to make a little video about talking about porting here. Okay. Oh, that coffee's good. So, where did this whole idea of porting come about? Well, I personally wasn't there when this happened. The story was told to me. And basically, Mount was told to me, guys out on the West Coast that were fallen, the old growth, were running these big, heavy, saws, big, heavy steels and whatnot. Some of them had a bar on the end where you had another guy holding on while you're running the saw. I mean, these things were tanks, man. You had to be a powerful man to run one of these things. Well, they started coming out with the German hot rods here. Andreas Still came over and he brought his saws to every logging camp and let the guys run them, and he did the legwork, and it paid off for him. But that's basically why they made these saws ported. They wanted a saw that could punch above its weight class and allow a guy to produce more. A lighter saw, that's, let's say, just modern times here, we'll say a 70 cc versus a 90. And the 70-some cc saw was a lot lighter. They modified them, and it wouldn't wear the man out. The man could produce more wood and possibly even use less fuel. So that's kind of where the idea came from. And it makes sense. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? Now, there also were shops, saw shops. And again, I wasn't there personally. I'm just relaying a story. But they had port while you wait. Okay? So the guy would get on his lunch break, drop off his saw, and he'd go across the street to the local tavern or whatever and have a cheeseburger and a whatever, beer, whatever they were doing. And he'd come back, grab a saw. Okay? Port while you wait. They weren't doing any machine work back then. And saws seemed to work fine. It did what it was intended to do. Okay? And it was no big thing. There was no chanting incantations over the chicken gizzards or whatever black magic with porting. It was just, guys knew how to do it that ran these shops, and some of the smarter guys would pay to have it done, and then they would look at it and they'd figure it out for themselves. Okay? And it was no big thing. Not like today where, there's arguments and, you can only do it this way. And I mean, this is crazy. It's crazy. So basically, the guys that knew how to port, okay, realized that they could make a decent living off of it. And you know what? That's fine. But somewhere down the road, the knowledge was concealed. Because the guys that knew how to do it didn't want to tell you how to do it because that's how they were making their living. Which I disagree with. I mean, I can cook a great omelet, but I still go to the diner and have somebody cook me an omelet. Same thing with the saw. I can port the saw, build the saw, but some people or whoever, they might want to just have it built. Maybe they don't want to spend $1,000 on grinders and whatnot. They don't want to spend $1,500 on lathe tools. They don't want to go through the learning curve of blowing up saws and hanging rings and all this other things that go with it. Because if you want to build saws, whether for yourself or for other people's, you have to invest some money. and you're going to screw things up. Nobody is going to, work on a saw. I shouldn't say nobody, but seldom is someone just going to pick this up the first time and everything runs perfect. It's not going to happen. I mean, it's like me. I play guitar, right? When I first started out, you got to get your fingers, and then after you play a couple years, you build up your technique and you take it as far as you want to go. The more you practice, the better you're going to get. It's just like anything else. Some people have more of a natural affinity for certain things than others. Some people have more God-given intellect or drive or whatever, and they're going to rise above. The cream's going to rise to the top. It's just the way it is. All men are created equal. Well, that ain't true. We all know that. Okay? So, let's talk, porting 2021. Now, I watch these guys making videos of how to port saws, and they're using the degree wheel, and they're doing it a certain way. Well, look at the degree wheel is decent, but it's not as precise. If you or me or somebody else puts on a degree wheel and shine the light through the spark plug hole, you take 10 guys, you're going to be a little bit off. It's just the way it is. Okay? So, I'm going to tell you another way. I'm not going to show you. I'm just going to tell you, and you can watch this video and think about what I'm saying. Okay? But first, let me cut off here to the piston here. Okay? Before we get into that. I just want to clear one thing up, because this is a fallacy I hear from guys all the time. Okay? Let me just take a look and make sure I got this. Yeah, okay, you can see. I'm going to stand back here. This is actually an 064 piston. Okay? Now, if you look at it, you can see that there's some carbon on there. And look at, I can scrape that off with my thumb. See that on there? Now, a lot of guys will tell you, well, you're running too rich. That's not correct. Okay? That's caused from a lean condition. Your saw is running lean. The top of this piston, think about it. It's coming up, compressing the mixture, and boom. Okay? It's taking the brunt of combustion. Okay? The pistons themselves, you're not going to be able to see it, but they're actually tapered, and they're outbound. And they do that because this top surface is going to expand more than this surface. If this was a round slug and you put it in here and the thing got hot, it's just going to stick to the bore. So it's kind of built in. I mean, I could show you on another video. We could take a micrometer and we can mic the thing up, and I could show you. Not all of them are the same, but it's the same general principle. Okay? So, what am I getting at here? Well, I think if you take Joe Blow's saw anywhere in the country and you look at the piston, they're going to have some of this on here, especially if it's a carbureted saw. If you run your mixture a little bit rich, you're going to be better off, in my opinion, because you're going to accumulate less, but you will accumulate. Now, how much is this? How much carbon is on here? Well, I'll tell you what. Just from looking at it, I'd say there could be 5, 6, 7 thousandths of buildup on here. Okay? So, what am I getting at? Well, this saw here is a steel 462. this saw is around, if I can recall correctly, 30,000 squish. Okay, well, what are you getting at? Well, I like 30,000 squished. And there's a reason why. There's also what they call a mechanical limit. And the bigger cc's you go up, that mechanical limit changes. Everything, when it gets warm, it expands. And when it's cold, it contracts. Okay? So, I got 30,000 squish. And over a period of time, I got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,000, 10,000 build up on the thing. Well, what's my actual squish then? So if I got 30,000 squish and I got 10,000 build up, well, I'm down to 20,000, right? Now, if you're meticulous with your saw and you keep an eye on it and you take it apart, get some oven cleaner, clean this off, put it back together, I think you'll be all right. But how many guys do that? How many guys are that meticulous? So this idea of tightening the squish, there's some real world consequences to this. So let's say I do some machining work, which I can do it no problem. I got the lathe, I got the mandrel, I could do whatever you want. And I set this at 20 thousandths. Okay, it's still within the mechanical limit. But if I start picking up 4, 5, 6 thousandths a buildup, whoa, and I get this thing hot, and the connecting rod stretches, the piston expand, all this, you're really playing with fire there. Okay? I mean, what's going to happen? Well, I mean, what's going to happen? It's just common sense. What's going to happen? And again, if you're very meticulous with your saws, you keep an eye on them, and you're running a certain mix. I like to run the moto mix, to be honest with you. And there's several reasons why. I'm not going to get into them all, but I like to run it. I find it's a good fuel. I have very little problems with it at all. It's expensive, but you spend $1,200 on a saw and you spend $400, $500, $600 to get it ported. That's a nice little investment. You want it to last. And again, if you're meticulous and you won't have to worry about it. But if you're just somebody that's going to run a saw, you're going to run into problems because this carbon's got to go somewhere. It has to. Now, if you look at this piston, you can see. Let's see if I got the light right. You see that? That's really no big deal. You can sand that down, and you're all right. But we've all seen them where they scratch. Now you're running, 11,000 RPM. That piston's going up and down 183 times a second, and a piece of this flakes off, a big chunk flakes off. Well, you could do a number to the piston. You really could. Okay, so that's one reason why I stay at 30 thousandths. And I run the Moto Mix, and I haven't had any problem. I got 5, 6, 7,000 hours on some of these saws, and they're running fine. Now, do I ever run pump gas? Yeah, if I'm going to be doing a whole crap ton of wood, okay, yeah, I'll pick up 2 gallons worth of mix, use it with my favorite oil, run the saw, and then when I'm done, I'll dump out whatever I didn't use, and I'll fill it up with Moto Mix and put it back on the shelf, and they're good. I mean, Steel recommends the stuff. A lot of guys think it's a scam to make money. I don't know. I'll go with the Steel Engineering over their word any day of the week and twice on Sunday. So let's get into some porting here, some porting ideas here. I'm not gonna show you. I'll tell you. So this is your piston. Now, I said this is an 064, but just for shits and giggles, follow along. This piston's inside the cylinder right now, in your mind's eye. Come here on either side of the wrist pin, and you can do it in all 4 quadrants if you want. You can check it up here, check it on each side of the wrist pin. I like to go to the wrist pin because you don't get any rock on it, okay, where she goes back and forth. And you do your solder test, just like you would when you're going to build a saw, okay? Now, you disassemble the saw, and you take your piston. Take a little bit of grease. You know, mark this side to the left, mark that side to the right, take a little grease, put it on there. Put it on where the squish band is. Now you take your piston. You know, you don't have to leave both rings on. You can leave the top ring on, because that's really the one you're worried about. And you push it up with that squish in there. You're at top dead center. Think about it. Okay? Now, I've had guys tell me, Iron Horse, he said something, well, you can't do it, no cigar, can't do it. Well, I'm just telling you how to do it, Herv. I know you got a couple years on me, but there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, brother. And I'm going to explain it to you. So now, you're at top dead center, okay? Now, a lot of guys, when they're doing this, they go to the top of the piston, okay? We bring the with the degree wheel, we bring it down so we see light. Well, that's wrong, okay? As soon as this ring, this top ring, this top portion of this top ring breaks your exhaust port, there's gas coming out of there. And that's what I use. That's how I don't go with the top of the piston. You can do that if you want, but think about it. So now, I got the piston with the greased pieces of solder, and I'm at top dead center, okay? Now I can start taking measurements, okay? I know what the stroke is. And some of these, if you look at the stroke, I mean, these things are only going up and down an inch, and depending on the CC, they're only going up and down a little bit. This one's got a 34 millimeter stroke. Whatever that works out, I could look it up. We could do the math real quick. But it's not a lot. It's not going up a lot. So, I measure with this thing at top dead center, and I get my dimension. Now, I bring this piston down to where that ring just cracks that exhaust port, and I take a measurement. Now, I know the distance from top dead center to the one that cracks it. Okay? Now, if you want to take that measurement and convert it into degrees, I got a program. I mean, you think about it. The piston's not going around like this. It's going up and down. And the degree wheel is taking this linear motion and it's converting it to degrees. But there's a little problem with that. When this piston goes up, believe it or not, it stops. When it goes down, it stops. Dead stops and comes back up. Well, that rod at the top, okay, it's forming an angle. And it's whipping around, comes up, comes around the other side, and comes down. Oh, gee, I never thought of that one. And then, conversely, on the bottom, it's the same thing, but now the rod's this way because it's a steeper angle. So, right there, you're off. And I know guys are going to come on and tell me, oh, that's not... Trust me. So now I got my measurement. I measure the piston. I have everything measured out. Okay? Now, same thing for the intake. Okay? Except the intake is going to be controlled by your bottom of your skirt here. Okay? Physically measure it. Now, if you have the measurements at any time, if you know the stroke and a rod length, you can convert that to degrees. And I have a program for that. I'll give it to anybody for free. You can have it. If you got a T153 calculator or the latest Texas Instrument calculator, I got a program. So you don't really need a degree wheel. I know guys are going to tell me, oh, you got to have it, you got it. Well, you don't. So now this piston comes down, and you measure it, and you know the distance. And you can move the piston up to where it closes off the port, and the rod comes around, and it comes back up, and you can measure that distance. You have the linear measurements of what this thing's doing. Now, when you build the saw, I mean, you can do your saw whatever way you want. How I build it is I go for a certain RPM. I have a certain RPM that I want that saw to produce the most power. Okay? And what you have to do after this point is you have to make a map of your cylinder. Okay? You make a port map. Now, I'm not going to get into that. Like I said, I'm not going to show you how to do everything, but I'm going to give you enough to where you can teach yourself. Okay? Then you measure everything out. You take your RPM you want this thing to run at, measure your ports, you got the distance when it opens, and again, you can convert it to degrees anytime you want, or if you want to use a degree wheel, you can too. I just measure everything because I have precision tools, and I can get the thing, very, very close, much closer than anybody's going to get with a degree wheel. You're just not going to get it closer with a degree wheel than with a thousandths depth mic. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. And a 10th indicator, you're just not going to do it. Ain't going to happen. Well, why does it have to be so accurate? Well, your port timing at that RPM, and now remember, at 11,000 RPM, this thing is whipping up and down 183 times per second. That's not a lot of time for this thing to open and close ports. Now remember, this is piston port. The piston's doing everything. Okay? If you have a saw that's a reed valve saw, well, then you can get some more intake out of it. If you want to increase your intake, you can go ahead and on the intake side, I got a formula. Depending on the CC stroke, you can put this in your cylinder at the bottom, and you can trace out where the port is. And then you can go ahead and take a little bit out of the piston. So what this will do is, as this thing comes down, it's going to close later, and it's going to open sooner. I was watching a video about a week back with Donnie Walker and Buck and Billy Ray, and he said his father used to do that. They call it a quick time. A lot of guys say, well, that's a lazy way to do it. Well, look I can go fishing with a bobber. You can tell me that's a little kid's technique, but there's no disputing its effectiveness. You just got to make sure you clean everything up, put a radius on it. On the rings, I chamfer the rings, I chamfer the piston, I do all this stuff. The lands here that go onto the piston pin, I chamfer those too at a 45 because you don't want to catch a ring. There's just little tricks, and like I said, I'm not going to tell you all. Okay. So now you got your measurements, you got your quick time. Okay. You run your calculations, you have your port map, you measure everything. It's a lot of work. It really is. It's again, if you're somebody that's just a tree company or somebody that wants a ported saw, I'm gonna tell you right now, you're better off just buying it for somebody because plan on spending some money on tooling. Plan on spending some money, and some of these pieces, angle pieces or whatever, these things, they're a couple $100. Sometimes you can find them on eBay. Maybe you can get a deal, but then it's always a crapshoot. You might get something that's serviceable, but you need to rebuild it or whatever. So you got everything set up. Everything's laid out. You got your measurements for the specific RPM you want. You can build yours at 10,000 if you want. Okay? It doesn't matter. Then you go in there, you do your reporting to those dimensions that you figured out. Make sure you wash everything, soapy water. You look, and after a while, you're going to be able to develop a feel for, hey, I ran this thing stock. It's got good top end, but the low end, like the 462. You get them stock, they're high winders. It's it's a very short stroke motor, almost like a NASCAR motor, right? RPM motor. You got everything set up. You make your cuts, polish everything, and then there's some other tricks, And here's another thing too. People keep talking about these numbers. Well, give me your numbers or whatever. Well, the numbers are only part of the equation. If I gave you the numbers out of this saw, okay, and you don't exactly duplicate what I did in there with everything else, it's not going to run the way you want it. For some reason, people have it in their heads, especially these new guys that are trying to do it for the first time, that, I go to here, this number on a degree wheel, and I put it together, and I'm going to have a bullet. Well, it's not going to work. So, I just get that right out of my head. It's just not going to happen. On this particular saw, I have port maps. So, somebody wants the port map from it. If it's the right guy, I'd be willing to sell it to you. And what you can do then is, you get that port map, you lay it out on your saw, lay everything out, grind, polish, put it back together. And if you do everything else that I'm doing, exactly, it's going to run like this. Now, there are some manufacturing tolerances. You might be within a couple of percentage points. They're pretty good with the tolerances. I know back when I was a kid, you could line up 10 dirt bikes, let's say 10 KX125s, and out of the 10, you're going to have one of them that's faster than all of them and one of them that's slower than all of them. Well, these saws, they got the tolerances pretty good. They're all going to be within a certain percentage. And that's basically it. I just basically told you what you need to do. You need to have the formulas. You need to have either computer software, which is going to cost you some money. I think there's a few programs available on the net for free. You have the measuring equipment. You have the determination. You're gonna get your port timing right, and your port timing at that target RPM is going to make a hell of a lot more power than compression. I'm telling you right now. Anybody worth their salt is going to understand what I'm saying. Now, somebody has a recipe that they build a certain way and they need to bump the compression up to 180 psi or 190 or whatever. Okay, well, you can still do it without machining. You can get in the combustion chamber. You can measure it. It's not going to be easy, but you can do it. And you can weld a little bit and then remachine and recheck it. Again, this is tedious work here, just like porting is. Porting to me, and strip everything, all the bullshit that people are trying to tell you, because I'm just telling you the straight goods here. I'm not trying to blow smoke up anybody's ass, and I'm probably going to piss off a lot of guys out there because they don't want you to know this shit. They really don't, and it's a shame. You got guys out there that have done 1,000, 2,000 port. Well, that $400. Wow, man, that's $800,000. That's a lot of money. And another thing, a lot of these guys out there that are I call them production builders. They'll get 10, 15, 20 saws, and the song's playing, da, 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 and they're just slapping these things on, cutting, slapping them, cutting. Brand new saw, They have a recipe, they're duplicating it, and they're selling it, and people are buying it. Well, you're not getting the best. Maybe you're getting the best of what he can do, but you're not getting the best out of your saw, I'll tell you right now. Because I've run their saws. I got no reason to bullshit you. I've been in every one of these guys' saws. I've spent thousands of dollars on port work. From people who build motorcycles, people who build watercraft, people who build snowmobiles. And when you start seeing, this guy does this, he does this, you become like the Borg. You start assimilating all these ideas. And when somebody comes out and says, you can't have a stock saw, a stock compression saw to pull a long bar. You got to have compression. Well, look it. It's horseshit. I can pull this saw, this 462, right off the dealer's shelf and put on a 28 or 32 inch bar, and it'll pull it. Now, is it going to pull it as well as a ported saw? No. But I can add my tuned exhaust on here, my tuned intake. You're going to pick up 15% power. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. And I got videos to prove it. So, anybody that's telling you got to have one of these high compression saws, they're either ignorant of how this engine actually works, or maybe they were shown a certain recipe that works for them, which is fine. Again, I'm not telling you how to build your saw. Or they're being misleading. And this is where I'm coming from, where the people that know how to do this don't want to tell you nothing. And that's fine. That's fine. But is that really, that just doesn't sit well with me. I build you a saw, or better yet, you buy a template from me. And you build the saw yourself. And you got the template. You have what you need, and you do the grinding. You put it together, and then you can use that as a blueprint. I mean, I sell you a saw. You can take it apart and do whatever the heck you want with it. Matter of fact, I want you to go nuts with it. Because you may come back and call me back and, hey, Fabe, you know what? I tried this, and I tried something, thinking out of the box, something I didn't think about. And you found an extra 2 or 3, 4, 5% gain out of it. Hey, thanks, buddy. But if you're going to be tight-lipped, you just want to be one of these guys, haughty guy, you're head above everybody else, and, I'm not going to deal with you. These guys that offer, all these different levels in this, and, you pay more and it goes faster. I'm not dealing with you, dude. I'm sorry. I know it's your business model. You run your business whatever way you want. I mean, that's up to you. I can't tell you what to do, but I'm not going to deal with somebody like that. Okay? I'm just not going to do it. Especially guys that, won't answer your questions after you put good money into their pocket. Now, I understand from their point of view, they don't want somebody taking their saw apart, posting their numbers and posting their cylinders and all that. And I would never do that to anybody. And if I sell a saw to somebody and they post it on a forum or something like that, you better hope I don't run into you. Because that's a real low thing to do. You want to take my saw apart and use it as a blueprint? You want to, use that as a template and to kind of get the idea in your mind's eye how it works? That's great. And there's no secrets in there. You cannot patent port work. People say, well, this guy's copying from this guy. Well, you know what? If your build is so good, then keep it to yourself. Because as soon as you put it on the open market, somebody with the knowledge and intellect can duplicate it, or in some cases improve upon it. And that's not being a slime ball. That's just, hey, you paid for the saw. Simple as that. So I think I gave you enough to where if you go back and you digest what I said, you can build yourself a decent saw without any machining. And again, these guys saying you have to have this high compression to pull a long bar. I'm sorry, you're full of shit because, this is a 462, that's a 440. I can grab my 461. I can pull it off the dealer's shelf, brand new out of the box. I can put my tune tube exhaust on there, a velocity stack, and my tune intake, bore out the carburetor, and I can pull a 36-inch bar with the thing. And I didn't even go into the cylinder. And it's going to last. Another thing, too, is you build it, and maybe if it's just not what you want just a fuzz more, well, you got the base gasket in there. You never cut anything. You never machined anything, and you want maybe just a little more bottom end. She pulls pretty good, but I'm a little bit too much on the top. I could take 400 or 500 RPMs off the top and just get a little meat on the bottom. Then you take your base gasket out of there and you put a little bit thinner base gasket. It'll drop everything. It'll drop the exhaust port, drop your intake. And you're going to lose a little RPM on the top, but you're going to pick up torque on the bottom. You see what I'm saying? You can fine tune it. So I hope this covers enough for people to, and again, watch it as many times as you need to where you get it. I'd advise you guys to get a book like this here by Mr. Robinson. All kinds of good information in here. Programs. You can run on your computer. Okay. Now this program is for gearing and whatnot, but he's got everything in here. Your compression ratio. Here's your formula, and again, you have to have some mechanical aptitude. You have to have some ability to do some math. Here's a nice program where you can calculate the position by numbers of your degrees of rotation. Excuse me, here it is right here. Piston travel versus crank rotation. Okay? Now, there's guys out there that are saying, you got your different port shapes, what you can do with your transfers. A very good book. Motorcycle Tuning by John Robinson. Everything you need is in this book. As long as you have it upstairs and you buy the measuring instruments and you want to work on it, you can do it. And the guys out there saying, well, that don't have nothing to do with a chainsaw. Well, you know what? You're an idiot. I'm sorry. Okay, out.